Belief is my final project for my Expressing Music Through Technology class. This video will explain how and why I did it. Going into this project, I knew that I wanted to do something with aliens and outer space, story-wise, just because I think that's super interesting and I think it leaves a lot of room to be creative with noises and weird effects and things like that. But I wanted to keep the story grounded. So I knew from the beginning that I would be incorporating acoustic guitar in some way, shape, or form into this track. So I just started thinking about how that would be, and I decided that the character of the story, which wasn't written yet, but I just decided that the character would be a musician and he'd be out playing guitar on his porch late at night when these aliens appeared. So I started thinking again, well, it's late at night. He's not going to be too crazy playing anything too complicated. He's tired, but he's playing. So I sat down and I started just messing with a few very simple chords, arpeggiated, and this is what I started playing. It's very simple, it's very calm, it gives me late night vibes, it gives me soothing vibes, and it's exactly what I imagine the character would be playing at this point in the night. I took guitar lessons for years, and so I messed with slides a few times, and I never did anything too interesting or right with them, but I knew that they were capable of making cool and weird sounds. So one day after work, I went to the music store and I bought a glass slide. Then I went home and I started messing with it, not in any kind of real slide playing way, but just seeing what kind of weird sounds I could make, because I knew, again, that I was making this piece dealing with aliens. So I was like, what does an alien sound like? And I don't have the answer to that, but I do have some weird sounds I recorded. So hearing that really inspired me to get writing the actual story. So I sat down and I started typing it up in the Notes app on my phone, and I decided that this character, for whatever reason, he had missed the appearance of these lights in the sky the past few nights, and he wasn't going to let that happen this night. So he decides he's going to stay up, play guitar, and just wait. His wife thinks this is silly, that there's no such thing as aliens, and thinks that our character should just go to bed. But he's open-minded, even though he doesn't completely buy it, and he wants to see what's going to happen. So he's out there alone, and all of a sudden, the lights come. And they don't come silently. They play all sorts of sounds, weird drum beats, they play alarming synthesizer sounds, just sounds that our character has never even imagined before are coming out of these crafts in the sky. So he gets super excited. He's never seen anything like this. So he calls for his wife, "Hey, come out. You gotta come see this." But she doesn't come out. She might be asleep, or she might be ignoring him because she thinks it's silly. So he runs off on his own into the woods to see where these lights are going, because they're flying away from him quickly, and he doesn't want to lose track of these amazing things that he's finally seen. After having the story written, I decided to pick up my guitar and record legitimately the piece that the character is playing at the beginning. So I went into Audacity, because that's what I have on my home computer, plugged in my guitar to my Scarlett, and then went from there. I recorded 2 different versions of the piece that the character is playing. The first version is the one he's playing before his wife comes outside and tells him he should go to bed. It's a little bit slower than the other version, which I did 5 beats per minute faster, just because I feel like he'd play slightly faster after that interaction, because he's kind of stressed or annoyed, and that just impacts his playing. Something else I did was I went deep into my old projects folder on my computer and found some nature sounds that I recorded probably 5 years ago, just knowing that I would probably use them someday. And sure enough, I need them. I think they'll help set the scene because the character and his wife, they live in the woods, not deep in the wilderness, but they live in the woods on the outskirts of a small town. So the nature sounds will definitely help illustrate where the action is taking place. I thought it would be very easy to sit down with my electric guitar and create the sounds that I imagined the alien spacecraft would make. I quickly found out that I was wrong. I sat down with my Fender Strat for hours on end, playing with effects pedals, playing with the effects built into my amp, changing the tone knobs on my guitar, changing the pickup selection, playing with different picks, trying so many different things, and nothing seemed to make the right sound. It was pretty frustrating because I thought going into this that would be the easiest part. Oh, I'm just gonna sit down and make some weird sounds, like that should be easy, but it wasn't. None of the sounds sounded right. Nothing sounded like the way I wanted it to sound. So I took a step back and remembered how I started with this project. And then I looked at my slide and thought, why am I not doing the same exact thing that I liked the sound of at the beginning of this? So I started playing the slide way past where even the frets are, and because that was where I was getting the good sound that I wanted on my acoustic guitar, and it had the same effect when I did it on electric. So I just built from there, and I used the effects built into my amplifier, and I messed with my wah pedal a bit, and eventually I got the sound I was hoping for. So it took some work, but I got there. Once the guitar was recorded, the next order of business was to find the startling synth sound that stops our character from playing guitar the second time. So I went into Apple's Loops on GarageBand, and eventually I found a sound called Dubstep Reactor Laser Lead. It's an audio loop, and it was exactly what I was looking for. It's loud, it's quick, and it would absolutely scare you if you heard it in the middle of the night. So I slid that into place, and then I started looking for a drum beat that would go along with it, and it needed to be something that was a drum machine or electronic. I didn't want it to sound organic at all. I didn't want it to sound like a real drum set. So I went through Apple's Loops again, and I found a MIDI loop that was called Trip Hop Thick Space Beat. I dropped it into the editor, and I started messing with it, clicking and unclicking things to make it sound less natural, less like a regular beat. And eventually I got it to a point where it still sounds like music, but it definitely doesn't sound like normal music. Putting that edited MIDI track next to the original one that came straight from Apple Loops, you can really see how different they are. Once I had the synth and the drum MIDI track laid out the way I wanted them, I picked one of my guitar recordings and dragged it into the project, and then arranged it in a way that seemed to make sense to the ear. Then once I had that set up, I looped the whole thing I just put together one time so that I have plenty of space to fade out as the alien spacecraft get farther away from our character and he has to chase them. That marked the end of the first movement. So in the second movement, our character is going through the woods and he's looking for these alien spacecraft and he's trying to figure out where in the world they went off to. So I slowed the tempo down to 75 beats per minute and I changed the key as well. Then I started looking through Apple's Loops to see what kind of calm but haunting sounds I could find. So I went into the mallet section and I found one called Lounge Vibes 4. It's an audio loop and I put it into my project and then I repeated it a few times. And on each repetition I transposed it either up or down. So each time you hear it, it's different and it's changing just like the environment that our character is in. From there, I wanted some haunting percussion as well, and eventually I found one called Japanese Spring Drum 5 and the one right after it called Japanese Spring Drum 6. So I put that underneath the mallets in a way that made sense, but then I felt like it was missing something. So I started to experiment with shakers, and it took me a while before I found the right one. But eventually I found one that sounded good underneath and added a good extra texture to it. And at the end, I wanted to use a faster shaker to go along with his anxiety as he gets closer and closer to the alien spacecraft that he seeks. This next section of the track came together pretty quickly. It's made mostly of Apple loops that I rearranged and transposed sometimes. I started off with some sound effect loops that represent the spacecraft presenting itself in the clearing to our character. I then found a drum machine beat along with some ambient sounds. I then dragged in the guitar piece that our character was playing right before the alien showed up the first time. I processed that acoustic guitar track with scanner vibrato and with distortion. That's to help drive the point home that it's not the character playing it this time, it's the alien spacecraft playing it back to him, along with their own original sounds added to it. For the most part, they stay pretty faithful to what he was originally playing, but at one point it gets cut up a bit and they splice in their drums and their synth sounds as well. And then the section ends with the sounds from the beginning of the section reversed to show that the spacecraft is leaving and our character is left wondering, what do I do now? At this point, the musical aspect of this project was complete. So what was left is I needed to mix the 3 separate movements together and record my skits so that listeners would know what in the world was going on. So I had 3 MP3s, one for each movement that I exported from GarageBand, and I dropped them into Adobe Audition along with the nature sound effects. From there, I arranged them in approximately the right way, and then listened to find the exact moments that I should fade out and fade in of each piece. So from there, all that was left was to record the skits. So I walked around the radio, television, film building until I saw this girl Samantha, and I asked her if she could read a few lines for me to use in a class project. Thankfully, she said yes, and then I went over to Bunce Hall to find an empty room in which I could record the rest of my skits. I wanted to find a place that was away from everything so that I could scream and not really disturb anybody. Then I dropped those recordings into my audition file and listened for the right moments to include the pieces of the skit, and I was done. I checked all my levels to make sure they were good, and I exported it, and the rest is history. And there you have it. From beginning to end, that's how I made Believe.